You know, a wedding is full of promises, not just between the couple, but between their families too. Gifts are given, futures are planned out. But what happens to all those promises, and more importantly, those gifts, when a marriage falls apart? Well, we're about to dive into the story of one woman's incredible 14-year fight to reclaim what was hers, and how that fight ended up changing the law for so many others.
It seems like a simple question, doesn't it? Who gets to keep the wedding gifts? Were they for the couple, for the bride, or for the groom? But when you're years down the line from a divorce, how on earth do you even begin to prove it? For a woman named Rousanara Begum, trying to answer that question turned into a grueling 14-year legal odyssey.
Okay, so let's start with this number right here. This is what kicked the whole thing off. Over 17.5 lakh rupees. That's the total value of everything, cash, gold, household items, that Rousanara Begum said was rightfully hers. For her, this wasn't just about money. This was the key to securing her future after her marriage was over.
So her fight officially began back in 2011. 2 years after she had already left her husband, S.K. Salahuddin, the divorce was finalized. But for Rousanara, that divorce decree wasn't the end of the story. No, for her, it was just the beginning of a brand new battle to get back what she felt she had been promised.
Now, to do this, she turned to a really specific piece of legislation, the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act of 1986. This law is literally designed to protect a woman's financial security after a divorce. So Rousanara used it to invoke a very specific right, the right to get back all the property given to her at any point during her marriage.
What happened next was, well, it was a legal marathon, a 14-year journey winding its way through the Indian court system, where it seemed like every single victory just led to another appeal, forcing her to fight the same fight over and over and over again.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you what an absolute roller coaster this was. She files her case in 2011. 3 years later, in 2014, she gets a ruling in her favor. Great. But then in 2015, the case gets sent back for retrial, not once, but twice. Then in 2017, she wins again. But 5 years after that, the High Court completely overturns it. Finally, in 2024, it all lands in the Supreme Court. Can you just imagine the sheer resilience it took to see this all the way through?
So, you're probably wondering, why did the High Court reverse the decision? Well, it all came down to this one single conflict in the evidence. It basically turned the whole case into a puzzle of who to believe.
So here was the dilemma for the court. On one hand, you have Rousanara's own father. In a totally separate dowry case, he had stated that he gave the money and gold directly to his son-in-law. But, on the other hand, you have the marriage registrar testifying that the official record, saying that same thing, that was just a simple clerical error, a mistake. So, who do you believe?
The High Court decided to take a very literal, black-and-white approach. They figured, hey, the father was the one giving the gifts, so his word must carry more weight. Their conclusion? The gifts legally belonged to the husband, which meant Rousanara had no claim to them under that 1986 act. And for her, this was an absolutely devastating blow.
But wait, because the story does not end there. The case eventually made its way to the Supreme Court. And India's highest court looked at the exact same set of facts, but they saw it through a completely different lens. They weren't just asking what the law said, they were asking what the law was for.
And this is where this brilliant legal principle called purposive construction comes in. It's such a powerful idea. Instead of a judge just asking, okay, what do the words on this page literally say? They ask, what was this law actually meant to do? What social problem was it trying to fix in the first place?
And this quote from the Supreme Court's judgment, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it. They said that any interpretation of this law has to promote equality, dignity, and autonomy. And crucially, it must be done in light of the lived experiences of women. In other words, you have to acknowledge the real-world patriarchal pressures that women actually face.
So, the Supreme Court was basically saying the High Court got totally lost in the weeds of who said what. They missed the entire point of the 1986 Act, which is to make sure a divorced Muslim woman isn't left financially high and dry. The court decided that the law's deep-rooted purpose, social justice, was way more important than some technicality about who physically took the gifts at the wedding.
So you see, this wasn't just a win for Rousanara Begum. It was a true landmark judgment. It sends a crystal clear message about how courts should be interpreting laws that were created to protect vulnerable people in the first place.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, it massively strengthens the financial rights of divorced Muslim women. Second, it's a directive to all lower courts.
You have to look beyond the literal text of a law to its social purpose. Third, it really champions using the law as a tool for fairness and real equity. And finally, it confirms that the real-world, messy, lived experiences of women have a place in the courtroom.
And all of